Maps are commonly used by us today, but we often fail to see the greater purpose of them. We look into the literal sense, but there are things beyond the map that we fail to see, quite literally. Today, we'll look deeper into maps, explore their knowledge, and create some maps of our own. This is the knowledge in maps. Maps are a visual representation of an entire area or a part of an area, typically represented on a flat surface. The work of a map is to illustrate specific and detailed features of a particular area, most frequently used to illustrate geography. The most common example of this is the map we see on Google Maps, a geographical map. These tell us where to go by visualizing an image of what places look like in real life. These maps are visual representations of what actually exists at any point on Earth, and also used as a way to traverse the world and get from point A to point B. Another kind of map like that is a subway map. This tells us the location of each subway route, where it goes, and any major locations around said terminals. These are important for subway routes, especially since usually your destination involves getting on multiple trains. There are other kinds of maps, like the cycle and the target, which focus on items moving in a certain direction. For the cycle, items are involved in a particular order that will eventually repeat. For the target, the items are arranged so that the ultimatum is in the center. One kind of map that is most prevalent to me is the road map. The road map combines visual elements with a sense of time. You're shown a visual of things to come with a time span of when said things will arrive. This is most commonly used for project deadlines, but more commonly to me, video game content. Whenever a game releases new content, it is often released in multiple groups. In order to generate an audience for this new content, a roadmap is shown so players have something to look forward to. Maps reflect reality by being based on it. The things written on maps are real things that exist that have been translated onto paper or in a different kind of medium. They are simplified but still real. When you look at a map, you're seeing things that exist. In that same way, you can also create reality. Since you know what you're seeing is real, you can envision what awaits you at that place. It represents knowledge as you can envision what the world looks like without having to go anywhere. In that same way, however, you can also choose what doesn't exist. In TOK, we talked about the power to create. What one places on a map are consequential choices. There are always distortions. You choose what is more accurate. Andy Walter tells us that there are two types of cartography and critical cartography. Critical cartography is socially embedded, created and read by perspective. Whether it be the culture, background, location, or language, a map is reflective of the cartographer's perspective. There's also a part of countermapping, the way that one changes a map by emphasizing certain parts. Apart from what's literally on a map, there's also how that is presented. Things such as size, shapes, and colors change the way we read maps, and therefore, how we interpret them. Manuel Lima dives into this idea, going through the history of maps and the way they have shaped knowledge. He tells us that we have always organized ourselves into chains, and that we've changed the metaphor for these chains. The earliest of these metaphors was a ranking system, such as a staircase, pyramid, or tower, that revolved around a higher being or power. It depicts that as you move down the chain, things become less and less important. This naturally led to the tree, a system that connected things by how related they are to each other. Things such as genealogy, evolution, and systems of law were put on tree maps. As time passed, the tree was replaced by the network. No longer just looking into how things simply related to each other, the network looks at how things build off each other, and how they connect with one another. The brain is probably the biggest network we've tried to explore. It has the same sense of complexity as the universe, which also shares its same pattern. There's also previous maps that have been adapted into networks. Social ties, ecosystems, and species have been adapted into networks. Clearly, a map can take many forms, and these forms impact how they share their knowledge, a problem I would soon find tackling myself. An assignment I was tasked with was to create a map that reflects my personal geography. This could be any kind of map I wanted, as long as it showed my perspective of the world. My thoughts immediately went to map overviews. One big part of my life is, of course, the location in which I frequent most often. This location is my house. Though I've represented it in countless videos and projects, I've never mapped it. I presented two types of maps, a floor layout and a recreation. Since I couldn't decide on one, I did both. Before this assignment, however, I was off making maps for my YouTube channels. Part of my return to content creation needed a medium to communicate it. For me, it was a roadmap. I created multiple roadmaps, each one highlighting content arriving at each of my YouTube channels. I even made one for my entire brand, Shadow Productions. These roadmaps were based on existing roadmap layouts for my favorite games. Though similar in layout, the message is completely different. The Shadow Productions roadmap is my personal favorite, as it looks like an ad you see for a streaming service, which is very fitting for my brand. Going back to my project, one map that I've always wanted to create was a floor plan map. These are mostly used for buildings, where interiors are depicted along with various structures. These include rooms, exits, and major points of interest. The inspiration for this was the many shooters I've played. Games like Overwatch and Halo have you play in locations with routes to objectives and items. Part of the strategy of these games is to remember routes in order to gain an advantage over the opposition. There exist many map overviews that highlight these routes, objectives, and items that one can easily access. I set out to do the same with my house. Using the appropriate software, I mapped out my house as it currently stands. I tried adding as many things as possible, the rooms, their objects, and furniture, as well as all measurements. Although they're not exactly to scale, and not everything was included due to limitations, it is still a very accurate map of my house. I even took it a step forward and made a second version, one with the surrounding area. The importance of this map serves two purposes: a literal floor plan of my house, as well as a historical piece which highlights how much the house has changed over 22 years. This even has a practical use, as I can use it for reference purposes whenever talking about my house. Apart from the literal aspect, there's also the figurative aspect. My house may be one way, but the way I perceive it is another. The second way I depicted my house was through simulation modeling. Created in Halo Infinite Forge, this recreation of my house is based on the areas of my house that are objectively the most populated by me. This includes my room, the bathroom, and the kitchen. These rooms are connected by the hallway, alluding to other rooms present throughout the house. Of course, since this is a recreation, the scale of the house isn't one-to-one. The presentation of my room is not the same as in my actual house either. For one, this depiction of my room is not how it looks in real life. So as a way of counter-mapping, I instead made a visual of what I'd hope my room to look like. I made emphasis on the way that the first things you see are the technology. There's the PC, the mini consoles, and the Xbox Series fridge. These are things that have influenced my life growing up and that I one day hope to properly enjoy. There's also small references to things in my life. The knowledge created by this map is of my interpretation and understanding of my house, daily routine, and workspace. As the audience, you can understand just how much of my everyday life is lived in a single location across a multitude of devices and sub-areas. It also is a really cool map to actually play on, as the toy-sized Spartans make the room seem like a utopia.
Double kill.
The maps I created only graze the surface of what I can do to depict the world around me. These can be expanded on. The only limitation is my mind. Maps are a medium that have evolved and will continue to evolve for years to come. Whatever the metaphor becomes, we'll still find ways to create meaning of the world around us. The next time you look at a map, try to see what it's really trying to tell you. Maybe you'll find something you haven't seen before.